Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is So-Hyun Bae. I'm a Korean-French graphic designer, typographer, and more recently co-founder of Atelier, a German-French design studio based between Munich and Paris. Little shout out to my partners in crimes, Alexis and Jan. Before I begin, I want to say thank you for inviting me here today, especially to talk about the research I carried out at the ANRT called 3 Languages, 2 Scripts, 1 Medium, which is a research about multilingual design focused on my specific set of trilingualism involving Korean, French, and English. I graduated from the ANRT in March 2020. This year must ring a bell for everyone. Despite the lack of fun and social life, I was incredibly lucky, and I was still able to begin my career in graphic design. However, in the midst of everything, I have to admit my ANRT research was left untouched. So this is why I want to come back to my acknowledgements. For Akim, Bas, Thomas, Johannes, and the West crew, as well as to all the speakers with their inspiring talks, to give me the opportunity to revisit my research with a more critical approach, a fresher mind, and also enlighten within me a kind of new spark. So yes, I speak Korean, French, and English. To be honest, my language skill a little Schrödinger-esque. I speak them all without really speaking them all, but we'll get back to that later on. Speaking 3 languages, I also write in 2 kinds of scripts or writing systems. Hangul for Korean, and the Latin alphabet for French and English, which we're probably all familiar with in this room. We can define my linguistic experience to biscriptual trilingualism. It can sound kind of complex, but this is a term I found most efficient to summarize the basic constraints of my research. So my main questions when it came to designing with the specific set of linguistic scriptural condition were, how can 3 languages be represented through 2 scripts? How can they coexist on one medium without one script overpowering another? To walk you through my thought process, let's first break this down pair by pair. If we were to pair different scripts, say Korean and French text, set in Latin and Hangul, it's a widespread practice to try to harmonize these different writing systems, which is what we call a typographic matchmaking in multilingual typography or type design. On the other hand, when it comes to working with different languages that share the same writing system, in this case, French and English, there seems to be the opposite tendency by setting one of the language in another style. We would often find contrasting combinations such as Roman italic, serif sans serif, regular bold, regular slanted, etc. Combinations, by the way, that are often binary. So in opposition to typographic matchmaking, there seems to be something of a typographic match breaking instead. So when it comes to designing with the specific case of biscriptual trilingualism, how can it be accomplished? How can I harmonize and discriminate languages at the same time? Perhaps the key lies in the balance between matchmaking and match breaking, but where's the right balance? But also the biggest question for me at that time was, what content needs such a specific linguistic condition? Where can I find any content that is Korean, French, and English? So a great deal of my research also consisted in creating my own trilingual material, which implicated experimenting with the 3 languages and inventing protocols to create trilingual content. One example is this book with triple spreads. The idea of this book came with a contradictory approach to the infamous architectural mantra, form follows function. Like rats who construct the labyrinth from which they plan to escape, as Raymond Queneau would put it, I wish to somehow, in a very literal way, create a book format that could nest my personal trilingualism and write a text that would most suit in, so that function follows form. Instead of open spreads consisting of 2 pages, I wanted a book that would consist of 3 pages, allowing a separate space for each language and to display all 3 languages on one spread simultaneously. Keeping it consistent with the trilingualism and the triple spread, I decided the book will be made of 3 signatures, or booklets. And with this kind of binding and foldings, the book had a total of 11 spreads. Now that I have the format, how to fill it in? What kind of narrative can be created from such a book? What kind of content can I tailor for this book? What kind of Korean, French, English text would I want to read from such a book? Never did I imagine I was going to be writing Olympian kind of text in the typographic research program, but believe it or not, I spent a lot of time writing. By placing a word on each page, I decided to create a text in 11 monosyllabic words, so 1 syllable by word and 1 word by page. And whether the reader chooses to read only in English, French, or Korean, I wanted the reader to understand a similar story at the end of the book. And it gave something like this. Soon will be gone the hot day, then shall come rain. 11 syllables. 곧 먼 날 진해, 구후 찬비 똑똑. Sous peu ce jour chaud nous quitte, puis vient la pluie. However, because of the grammatical difference between the 3 languages, I was frustrated that the meaning of the words were not corresponding to each other on an open spread. Finding no other ways to reconcile the grammatical difference, I decided to look for another kind of content. I might have been frustrated back then, but looking back at it today, maybe I should have worked with those little texts I just presented. Coincidentally, there was a mind-blowing conversation I had with fellow student researchers of the ANRT that forever changed my mind. We were actually talking about the word mind, and I realized that we had different understanding of this word. While everyone else considered mind as something of the brain, I insisted that it was something of the heart. It turned out that I've been living with a mistranslation all this time. When we look up the word mind in the English-Korean dictionary, it is defined as 마음. But 마음 in Korean includes a broader meaning. It has the same faculties as the mind, but 마음 fluctuates between reasoning and emotions. 마음 is also a term that is easily interchangeable with the term heart to talk about emotions and intuitions that cannot be explained rationally. This funny incident led me to investigate the English term mind with Google Translate, translating it between Korean, French, and English until the word mind finds its way to the words brain and heart. After collecting these words, I studied the succession of the words and translations and reconstructed a narrative from mind to brain and from mind to heart in order to assemble them into the book. Little side note, I found that when the word mind reaches for the word heart, I also found the words gut, which is another organ, and courage along the way. Perhaps the mind needs courage to reach the heart. Now that I had the words, in what font style should the words be composed in? How can the 3 different languages be represented typographically on each page? After all, am I not enrolled in a typographic research program? But sure enough, this is the part where I struggled the most. Once again, like the book, I looked for typographic combinations that could work for trinary systems and looked for variations in letter forms that could allow a trinary combination. One of my experiments consisted in attributing different kinds of contrast to different languages. So while one is in high contrast, another will be in low contrast, and another one in reverse contrast, or perhaps even make them alternate. But which contrast for which language? Should French be represented in high contrast while Korean is maybe in low contrast? On top of that, the reverse contrast seemed to attract too much attention compared to the other styles. Another attempt was to try out simple pairings with existing fonts, but it was difficult to establish a correlation between the different letter forms and the three languages. Whatever letter forms I chose, I seemed to bump into the same difficult questions. Which letter forms can represent the three languages without being biased or cliché? How can my choices be justified? Once more, I suspected the difficulty may actually come from the content itself. Here I was dealing with isolated words, and considering letters in the scale of single words seemed too limiting, as I was focusing excessively on letter forms. So instead of isolated words, I decided to work with strings of words instead, which led me to put aside this experiment with the triple spreads and to experiment with another kind of content. Looking into my own experience of trilingualism, I tried to observe how I communicate with some of my family members who also are trilingual like me. I grew up with my brother and my cousins, and at home, we used to speak French or English to each other, which our parents strongly disapproved. So at some point, we weren't really speaking any languages anymore. This is what I meant when I said earlier my language skill is Schrödinger-esque. It's definitely shaped out of Korean, French, and English, but it's also kind of nothing at all, as I speak most comfortable when I can mix all three languages. My cousin seems to be the same, as you can see from our chat. 나는 이제 serious하게 컨퍼런스를 듣겠어. It is often a form of communication limited to spoken language or ephemeral writings like chats or notes. Never would an official document be written in this manner. I then wondered if I could make this kind of speaking become more literary or at least something closer to literature. So I tried to go beyond these ephemeral writings and decided to actually write little stories while code switching. But I soon realized the challenge of such task. Linguists define this habit of switching languages in the middle of a sentence or a conversation as code switching, and explain it as a conscious and unconscious psychological process multilingual speakers can have. Then how can I write consciously while code switching unconsciously? How can I recreate the spontaneous way of speaking in writing? At this point, I realized that I needed a tool to write simultaneously in the three languages, a tool that could imitate code switching. So I created protocols that would enable me to obtain random mixes of the three languages within my text. During the writing process, there was a phase where I tried to figure out the grammatical structure of code switching that sounded most natural to me. At some point, this writing protocol was like a board game where I would throw a dice to decide on the next word or language. But eventually, because the protocol was rather systematic, it was also possible to program it in Python, which led me to code a trilingual text generator. But when we look into the raw generated text, although comprehensible, it is not that easy to read, especially distinguishing the French and English homonyms like possible in French or possible in English. So there was a need to design this text in order to read it better. In my previous experiments, I learned the difficulties to attribute shapes to languages and to base match breaking solely on letter forms. But since I was working with sentences and text, this opened a new typographic playground to experiment with layout and typesetting by varying the font size or shifting around the baselines. This is a finished trilingual story set and ready to be read out loud. The text is typeset in a self-made slap serif Latin and a matching Hangul. The text is composed like a music score. Each language is placed on a different level, with French at the very top because of its diacritics, English at the bottom, and Korean sitting in between the two Latin script-based languages. The numbers and punctuations are shared by the three languages, and I wanted them to appear bolder, like rest measures found in music scores. I also wanted the numbers to be read spontaneously without a predefined language. The shifted baselines were directly incorporated into the design, as well as into the font file. Although, looking back to this work today, I wonder whether there could have been another way to compose this text. Back then, being relatively new to type design, I wanted to practice and consider this project as a good excuse to create my own font, as well as my own toolbox. But as I was putting together this presentation, I stumbled upon some very early sketches from when I began my research in Nancy. Again, looking back into my habits of trilingualism, when taking notes, I tend to write also in the three languages, so in both Hangul and Latin. And sometimes some Latin Hangul ligatures would sneak into some notes. I remember being ambitious of creating a cursive font, both Hangul and Latin, that would also allow these ligatures as open type features. But being a complete rookie in type design, I didn't dare to begin such an adventure. But nevertheless, I keep wondering today whether I couldn't have used my handwriting to compose this text, making my hand the natural matchmaker and baseline regulator. Having lived in Germany for the last 4 years, German has also become an important language for me. Even if I am far from being fluent in German, I challenged myself to write a piece for this occasion. But this time also incorporating German into the lot, a biscriptual quadrilingual text, if you will. And I would like to finish my talk with the reading of this text that tells that one time when I was looking my way around in Munich. 나는 우츠와 요제스burg역 근처에 아비떼했다. C'est une station often mistaken for Josefsplatz, qui est also on the same no선. So you live in Maxvorstadt이라고 ask하곤 한다. But no, 나는 Bergamlein, une montagne at the clay, comme a lump grise on a potter's wheel at the edge of München. Fraunhoferstraße역에 descendre 한다. Amado, la rue est named after the scientist Fraunhofer. Je me suis rappelé about Fraunhofer's telescopes I once read about as I marchais down his street. 다음으로 look for 할 주소는 Horststraße 1, Wood Street, Rue de Bois, 나무길. La rue se traduisait 스스로 over and over and branched out through my 머릿속. À un moment, I had to do a triagon from Müllerstraße, which honestly sounded comme Mule Street, Rue de Mule, 당나귀길. 다시 길 이름은 avec une image d'un donkey from Bremen overlapped 되고 le logo Müller in Cooper Black overpowered ma vision with a bright orange color. Horststraße 1 endlich, and the orange puffed away. Thank you, Val.
Beautiful. You can stand there.
I can stay here.
Yes, you can stay there. So-Hyun, aren't you afraid that everybody that wants to become like friends with you needs like a dictionary to communicate with you?
I also need a dictionary, so
To communicate with yourself, like.
I can make it. We can make our own dictionary together.
I like that. I like that. Does anybody have questions? Yes.
At this point, I'm really curious. When you start counting with your hands, which language do you use?
I don't know. It's like people asking me which language I dream. I don't know. Sometimes Spanish pop up for some reason.
So again, in your mind, you alternate all the three when you think. Do you think in words?
Sorry?
Do you think in words? No, there's people that don't think to think in words.
Do I think in words?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Maybe by concepts and when I said I tried to figure out the syntax of my own code switching, that's what I was also trying to figure out. It's like, is there a specific language to which I'm attached to when I speak about specific things? Like, for example, the last text.
Can you speak in the mic, please, So-Hyun? In the mic.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So, as I was saying, what was I saying? So, for example, the last text I read you, most of the street names are in German because, yeah, obviously because I'm talking about it, and there's some German words that pop up now because I got more used to talking about it in German, like financial stuff. But yeah, maybe, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it was perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
And So-Hyun, maybe a naughty question, but if you're really mad, do you like curse in like English, French, or everything?
I have a great advantage to that because I have a very vast vocabulary in all languages.
Does anybody has a question? Yes, my spirit animal, Tim.
So there are a number of scripts around the world, mostly minority scripts, where they use color, usually as an emotional indicator, and especially if it's a noun that might actually be understood with different emotional registers. And I'm wondering if you ever considered using color as a determining factor in anything you were doing.
Beautiful question.
It's a good and difficult question. I have to say, I think we had this discussion this morning, but I really tried to think in black and white during my research. I really wanted to keep this purely in signs and not, above that, let's say. But it does remind me that in like the history of Hangul, there was a time when they used to use a red dot to sometimes indicate a pause in a text, but this has to be fact-checked, by the way. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of that. But maybe it could be a solution also. But there is several ways of representing this, of course. I'm just expressing just one or two.
And what is your ultimate goal to do with all of these languages combined?
That's what I'm still figuring out. I guess what I'm presenting right now is really just a snapshot of within a flow, you know. And yeah, call me back in 10 years, so maybe I'll be.
I will call you. Questions? No, give a hand for So-Hyun Bae! Woo!